The Scum Villain's Self-Saving System is a MOCN novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. The main couple of the story is made up of two men. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Chapter 3. Shen Qingqiu was an easily satisfied person. Since he had already transmigrated into proud immortal demon Wei and in his original world had vanished or died and flipped his braid, he might as well muddle along and live here. He'd come to this cultivation world into a body with fairly good cultivation and sword skills, someone who was even in a well-known righteous sect. If he wanted to be in the limelight, he could be in the limelight. If he wanted to shrink back, he could do as he liked at Kangqiang Mountain Sect's Jingjing Peak without anyone asking. There was nothing bad with this kind of situation. The only difficulty was finding a sister. This stallion novel, as soon as a sister arrived, she became the male leads. Everyone knew this. However, Shen Qingqiu didn't have any high requirements. He'd be content to just while away his time here and wait to die. At any rate, it wasn't much different from his previous life. But so long as Luo Binghe was present, he couldn't even speak of being in the limelight. As long as he remained in this piece of messy, dogshit writing's original path, even if he retired to some idyllic place, after Luo Binghe rose to power, he had the ability to pluck him out of hiding and slice him into a human stick. He could forgive being transmigrated into a stallion novel, but why not as the protagonist? He could forgive being transmigrated as cannon fodder, but why must it be as the person who abused the protagonist and for the transmigration to happen after all the abuse had occurred? It's not like I don't want to hug this main character's thighs, but who let this fucking man be so black? The revenge that needs to be taken is some thousands of deeds. Shen Qingqiu cursed the creator of this pitch-black protagonist Luo Binghe, airplane towards the sky. If you're going to write a stallion novel, then you should write a good one and not spin off some damned unconventional thing. In short, he could only try to communicate more with the system and figure out how to increase his points, advance through stages, and unfreeze the OOC function. If the situation didn't look good, it was still not too late for him to find another way out. For the first step, he intended to explore and familiarize himself with the surroundings. The Tiangong 12 peaks were like 12 imposing swords that had sprung up between heaven and earth, pointing straight towards the sky, piercing through the clouds. Shen Qingqiu occupied Jingjing Peak, which was not the tallest among them but was certainly the most quiet, green, and comfortably shaded, perfect for scholars. Additionally, most all of Shen Qingqiu's disciples must learn some Qin Qi Shu Hua and the like. Often sounds would drift by like someone reading out loud or playing the qin, truly a wonderful place for youths to indulge in the liberal arts. It perfectly matched the original Shen Qingqiu's characteristics and was a good start for earning points. Some disciples passed by Shen Qingqiu and respectfully greeted him while he attempted to grasp the original Shen Qingqiu's mannerisms, his face cold, a slight nod, moving actively but withdrawing his inner self. Like this, he managed to pass even though inside, his head ached at how he was going to reconcile the character in the novel with the person alive right now. But these matters still weren't the most urgent for Shen Qingqiu to solve right now. If he wanted to save himself, he first needed to get the original's martial arts and sword techniques. If he hadn't remembered wrong, before Luo Binghe was blackened, Kangqiang Mountain Sect encountered some big events, some attempted demon realm invasion, Immortal Alliance conference, all these required him to fight in person. If he only wore the appearance without any real ability, he's doomed. Don't even speak about proceeding in the plot, the protagonist wouldn't even have to act for some nobody Yao or Guai to play him to death. Shen Qingqiu entered deep into the forest without anyone's notice. He made sure no one was around before he slowly drew the sword at his side with his right hand, his left hand on the scabbard. This Xiuya sword was Shen Qingqiu's proof of fame as both a technique and the sword at his side. The sword light flashed snow white and clear without being too bright, definitely high-quality goods. Originally it was written that if your own aura was poured into the weapon, it would emit a glowing light. Shen Qingqiu wanted to figure out how to insert his aura into the sword when the sword in his hand immediately emitted a shimmering white light. It seemed like the original's martial abilities and techniques were automatically inherited. He could use his skills without needing to think too much. The sword light was emitted without much direction from him. Shen Qingqiu wanted to see how strong he was, so he carelessly slashed in front of him. Who knew this careless slash was enough to scare people? The sword light shone dazzlingly and swept out in front of him, forcing him to close his eyes. When he opened them again, the ground looked as though it had been ravaged by lightning, a deep ditch lying before him. Fuck. Shen Qingqiu was expressionless, but his heart was about to burst inside. It's even more aggressive than he imagined. Worthy of a peak lord. With this martial ability and technique, plus some diligent practice, even if he must face off against Luo Binghe in the future, he'd have a chance to flee. Right. To be able to flee is enough to make Shen Qingqiu laugh for 3 days straight. His needs truly weren't high, he'd be happy just to keep his life. He wanted to practice more so he could advance his plans sooner. But then he heard someone stepping on and breaking branches underfoot. Truthfully, that sound was very far away, but his 5 senses were too keen. It wasn't difficult at all for him to figure out where. Shen Qingqiu looked at the deep ditch in the ground and slid his sword back into the scabbard, retreating into the deep green of the forest unseen. The sound of footsteps drew closer before Shen Qingqiu could hear that it was not only one person. Sure enough, after a moment there appeared Luo Binghe's soft bright face and a fresh delicate girl's voice in the clearing. Luo, Luo, look, there's a very large ditch here in the ground. Hearing this method of addressing him, Shen Qingqiu, who hid in the darkness, almost stumbled. The system helpfully explained.
New character, Shen Qingqiu's youngest female disciple, Ning Yingying.
Shut up, don't need you to introduce. Those who call Luo Binghe like that won't be just the one, this old man knows. Shen Qingqiu's face was expressionless. Following behind Luo Binghe was a pretty girl who seemed to be a little younger than him, her braided hair bound with orange ribbons, innocent and lovely. Every standard cultivation novel must have an adorable little apprentice sister. And this little apprentice sister gave Shen Qingqiu some complex feelings. This is because he had designs on Ning Yingying. No, wait, it should be that the original Shen Qingqiu had designs on Ning Yingying. Shen Qingqiu was a hypocrite. Since outwardly he seemed fair and it appeared to be a pure and selfless love, inside he must be shameless, dirty, and despicable. He was a teacher, but had dirty thoughts towards his lively and well-behaved disciples. Several times he tried to lay hands on them and almost succeeded at that. To dare lay hands on the male protagonist's woman, you can imagine the result yourself. When Shen Qingqiu was reading the novel, he felt it was a bit strange. Why didn't Luo Binghe castrate him? He even went to the reader comments section and joined the group in writing "Please castrate. If you don't castrate you'll anger the readers," these kinds of comments. If at that time they had succeeded, he would cut off the hand that had written such things. Luo Binghe looked at it but wasn't interested, only smiled warmly. Ning Yingying wanted to keep his attention on her but had no words to say. Which martial brother do you think it was who cut the sword scar during practice? Luo Binghe held an axe and began to cut down a tree, said, "Impossible. Among the cultivators on Qingjing Peak, there's only Shizun who's capable. Shen Qingqiu mentally coughed twice. Young boy, you sure know your stuff. Ning Yingying sat on a slanted slab of limestone, resting her head against a hand. Oh! Then that crevice was created from being struck by lightning. Luo Binghe didn't pay attention to her anymore, focusing all his attention on his hands, and continued to honestly cut down trees. These tree trunks weren't weak and thin. The axe was half rusted. Luo Binghe was only 14 years old, so cutting down the trees was extremely tiring. It wasn't long before his forehead was covered in sweat. Ning Yingying was bored again and entreated him, spoiled, Luo, come play with me. Even with a face full of sweat, Luo Binghe didn't rub it off and continued to chop trees. He said, it won't do. Martial brother instructed me. After taking care of today's firewood, I still have to jump in the water. If I finish chopping wood faster, I'll have time to cultivate some more. Ning Yingying said, the Martial brothers are sure bad. It's always you doing this and that. The way I see it, they're purposefully bullying you. Humph, I'll go back and tell Shizun about this, guaranteed to let them not dare to bully you again. Shen Qingqiu was frightened and his face changed color. No, 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 you had better never tell me. What should I do? Which side should I teach a lesson to in the end like this? At this time, though Luo Binghe's age was small, he had tasted all kinds of bitterness in life. Still, he managed to preserve a heart as pure as a white lotus. Towards Ning Yingying, he earnestly said, please do not. I don't want Shizun to be troubled over these small things. The Martial brothers don't mean to be malicious and just see that my age is small. They're just giving me more opportunities to practice hard. Shen Qingqiu was truly about to have his heart moved by this child. You say, how good it would be to have a child so sensible. In the middle of Ning Yingying's chatter, Luo Binghe finished cutting enough firewood for his task. After putting things in order, he also sat down on the limestone slab, cross-legged, and began to cultivate. Shen Qingqiu let out a long sigh in his heart. Truthfully, the protagonist's lack of cultivation in the earliest, bitterest scenes of the novel was partly for this reason. It was obvious that Ming Fan gave him a false technique to practice with when he joined in the beginning. The more he sought to cultivate, the more dogshit difference there was between him and the others. It was only because Luo Binghe was such a heavenly talent and had the support of the demonic blood hidden within his body that he managed to feel out and grasp his own cultivation practicing method. Way too unscientific. Even as he sighed, he heard the chaotic sound of many footsteps. Shen Qingqiu immediately knew it was nothing good and something bad would happen. Ming Fan brought some low-level disciples with him. At the sight of Ning Yingying, he immediately went up to take her hand. Little Martial sister. Little Martial sister, I've been looking for you, you know. How come you never want to drop by our place? The back of the mountains is so large, what'll you do when night falls and poisonous snakes emerge? This older apprentice brother has some fun stuff for you to see. He naturally saw the mutely cultivating Luo Binghe treating him as though he was air. Luo Binghe is quite mannerly and opened his eyes to greet him as a martial brother. Ning Yingying laughed, I'm not afraid of any poisonous snakes. Besides, there's Luo here to stay with me, right? Ming Fan slanted his eyes towards Luo Binghe and let out a humph. End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.